your host, Rhea. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast dedicated to helping you not only understand English better, but also communicate like a native speaker. Today's guest has agreed to sit down with me for an interview. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Austin, 32 years old. One of my favorite hobbies, I love fishing, especially during nice weather times of the year. And I also work out pretty consistently throughout my week. And I also enjoy watching baseball when it's in season.
Nice. Well, let's get into today's discussion, shall we? Today's topic is college. For those of you who are listening, in the U.S., when we refer to college, it's like an umbrella term. We're referring to higher education. So it could be a community college, it could be the university, but we just use this term to refer to higher education in general. Why don't you tell us, well, let me first begin by saying, did you attend a college, 2-year college, 4-year university? What was it like for you?
Well, I attended community college first for 3 years, then I transferred to a 4-year school. The community college level was probably, I would say, a little bit not as challenging as the 4-year, but it would still benefited greatly from both places. But I found it kind of funny because, when I went to a 4-year school, in regards to what I majored in, I was more geared to and got more out of courses that weren't supposedly relevant to my actual major.
And what was your major?
Criminal justice.
Interesting. What made you choose that major?
Oh gosh, let's just say I was flipping through a community college catalog and it was about the only thing in there that remotely interested me or just felt like something I would actually enjoy. The only thing I thought that would give me somewhat of a direction.
I see. I also attended a community college first. It is the route that many people decide to take in the U.S., and then I transferred to a 4-year university. Speaking about the classes that you took, did you enjoy those classes? How were they? What were your teachers like?
One instructor I had that was the primary justice instructor in community college. Felt like he was very knowledgeable. Of course, he had been a policeman for several decades and was also a retired lieutenant. So I feel like he was very knowledgeable in that specific field, and because he had worked in it for many years before becoming an instructor.
I see. And for my instructors, I would say I liked pretty much all of them. They were pretty cool and easy. Many of them were very easy to talk to, and that might surprise some of you who are listening because I know in some countries the relationship between students and professors can be quite distant. But that's not the case in the US, I would say, for the most part. Many times the students may talk to the professors after the class, and it might be to get help with the material, or it could just be they want to talk about sports or they want to talk about other things. It depends on the professor, of course, but in some cases, people might develop some kind of relationship with their professor. And then after they graduate, perhaps they can put them on their resume, and then they can be contacted later. Here in the U.S., it's quite common for people to live on campus at the university, the 4-year university. Before I get into that, let me talk a little bit about the community college versus the university. Community colleges, they are not as big. They're located you can find them in many different locations in smaller towns. And so it's easier for people to go to a community college rather than maybe a university, which might be a little bit further away from where they live, from their hometown. Community colleges they're much less expensive. We're talking about tuition, and I know you have probably heard that in the U.S. tuition is astronomically expensive. That's true for the most part. But like I mentioned before, at community colleges, it is lower. But at many universities, it is quite high. If somebody is of a higher class, then it might not be so expensive to them. They have the money to pay for it. maybe outright. But for a lot of students, they may not have that money, or family may not have it. They might not be able to help them to afford tuition. And so that does leave many students to maybe try to get some student loans, or they may have some particular grants, or, oh, scholarships are big. So I was able to get a scholarship. If I had not gotten it, I would not have been able to go to graduate school. These things are so important. And so when it comes to tuition, would you say that at your schools that you attended, were they like average or above average in price? And just what was that like for you as far as tuition goes?
Well, I took out student loans to pay for my tuition. I feel like probably at the community college level, it was pretty well in the ballpark. Like it was pretty average, but at the university level, I thought just man, like it was crazy how much it was. But like, of course, also where I went to, I mean, it was a university that did have a strong reputation, especially from, well, obviously academic standards for years, but just over time, it just started just dwindling. Just it got worse and worse as time passed by, even after I graduated. But
Yes, and I remember at my community college, it was significantly less, especially if people were from Kentucky. I do think that for out-of-state students, they had to pay more, and that was the same at my university. International students, oh my goodness, the amount of money they had to pay was ridiculous, ridiculous. But many students still decided to pay the tuition. And so I think for the international students, it could have been around 20 to 30,000, but maybe between 10 to 15,000 for those who are from the local area or just students from the U.S. But there are some private schools in the U.S. where tuition can be $60,000, $70,000 per year. We're talking about those elite universities like Harvard, MIT. They could be even more than that now, who knows? But they are quite high. For public universities, they're going to be much less, typically, probably less than 30,000 a year, could be less than 15,000. So I would say average at a public university may be less than 15,000. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that, but probably less than 15,000 for a public. But when you get to private, you're going to be dishing out the dough, literally. When it comes to the other things like the actual students themselves, there tends to be a range of students. So I did teach at a community college, and my students ranged in age from 16 all the way to 70. So that's a pretty big difference. I had people from all walks of life in my classes. At the university, you probably are not going to see that, especially when it comes to like a bachelor's degree. Maybe in the graduate program, you may see people who are from different backgrounds and also of different ages. In the US, it's quite common for students to live on campus when they are attending a four-year university. So when you transferred over, is that what happened with you? Did you live on campus or off campus?
I lived off campus. I actually lived at home for the whole duration of my college career.
Okay. And when I was at my community college, I also lived with my parents, and that's the case for a lot of students because, like I said before, it is closer to where most people live, and they don't have dormitories. Well, I don't know. I guess there could be some community colleges, maybe in some parts of the country that have dorms, but as far as I know, they don't. So people live with their parents, or if they have an apartment, they can, live in their own apartment. But at the university, when people transfer over, or maybe they started there first, they may live on campus. So you lived in the dormitories, right?
No, I did not live in
Oh,
a
the
dorm.
whole duration of your education, you were at your parents' place. Okay. And what about your friends? Did they live in the dorms?
Some I know who actually, were able to get scholarships to major universities. Know of some of them probably lived in dormitories. And then, I still knew plenty of folks close to where I grew up who still commuted to school while still living at home. So, it just varies person to person.
Okay. And for some people, if the university isn't too far away, they may decide to commute. My university, which is located in Western Kentucky, it's about an hour and maybe an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes away from my hometown. And while I could have commuted, I decided not to and decided to go ahead and live in the town. And I stayed with my brother because my brother went to the same university as me. Did I like that arrangement? Not so much, not so much. But I mean, I did get along with my brother pretty well, so it wasn't so bad for me to live with him for about a year and a half. And then I moved out in my own apartment. I never lived on campus, so I don't have any experience with that. But some of my friends, they did live on campus, so I would go to the dormitory. And the dormitories, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but the dormitories here, they do tend to be quite big, quite large, and I don't know how familiar you are with them, but as far as I know, most of them, I guess they are mixed, men and women, but then women might live on one floor, men live on the second, and women live on the third. They split them like that, or there may be some buildings with only women and only men. Do you know much about it?
I did visit Murray State once, and I know that a lot of their dorms, usually it's half and half. Like, first set of floors might just belong specifically to the men or to the women, and then the next half belong to the other.
Okay. And maybe that is how it is. Maybe they just decide to go ahead and split it, like maybe first to fourth women and then fifth to however many for men. Okay. Well, I did go to some of the dorm rooms, and maybe some of you listeners, you've watched American movies, TV shows, and you've seen the dormitories and you wonder, do they really look like that? They do for the most part. When I think about the movies that they create, many of them tend not to be so big. But of course it depends, because there are some that are more spacious, but they cost more money. There are some dorms where I think the typical arrangement is to have maybe 2 people in a room. There could be some that have 4 people. I don't know how many they can have in a room. I've seen the ones that have 2 people in each room, but if you are willing to pay more money, you can get your own private dorm room. So the movies you've seen, the TV shows you've watched, I would say they do give a pretty accurate portrayal of dormitories and what it's like. As far as how difficult it is to live in the dormitories, I've talked to some people who have told me they had problems with their roommate, and that can be tricky. That can be tricky because some universities, they have a very, very limited amount of dorms or dorm rooms that the students can stay in. So if you have a problem with your roommate and there's no other rooms available, what are you going to do? You have to learn to just deal with the problem, get along with the roommate. And that's what the person I talked to about this, the person who had a problem, she just had to deal with it, unfortunately, because she couldn't go to her parents' place. She was from another country, and she also couldn't afford her own apartment, so she just had to deal with it. Another thing that some of you might have seen while watching some movies or TV shows is all the groups or organizations that are on campus. And that is also, I would say, accurate. Many universities and even community colleges do have some clubs, some particular groups that students can join if they want to. Do you remember at your community college or university, did they have many different clubs or organizations that students could take part in?
Yeah, of course, my specific major, we had lots of different justice-based groups. Then, of course, other, things might be more geared towards, specific, just racial clubs, like some, and then others are just ones where they just have common interests, just like sporting events, they had like a bowling league, and then some had just other various whatever interests them, they found groups to partake in.
And did you join any of those groups, clubs, organizations?
Not particularly. See, like at a university level specifically, it was I mean, classes took up a lot of your time, just like, and I'm sure I can speak probably for anybody who experienced a university level education background. Like, you're just, usually at the end of the day, you're just mentally just, you're wiped out. You're just, you're ready to call it a day pretty much.
I understand. The community college that I attended, I remember they did have some different clubs or groups. And one I remember in particular was an anime club, Japanese anime. I used to watch it when I was younger, so I joined it, but then I found out it wasn't really for me, so I decided to never return. But that's one I remember specifically. And they had others related to, like he said, some different interests or hobbies and things like that. At the university, yeah, because like I said, universities are much bigger, there are more students. My university probably had around, I don't know, they had at least 10,000, 15,000 students, and many came from all over the world, which is surprising because of the location in Western Kentucky. But they had all kinds. They had the fraternities and sororities. I don't know much about those types of organizations, to tell you the truth. I probably learned more about them from watching TV shows and movies, because I myself was never interested in joining a sorority. Sororities are for women, fraternities are for men. What do they do exactly? I'm not sure. I mean, do you know much about them? Do you know anyone who was in a fraternity or sorority?
I don't know anybody that was in a fraternity or sorority. Reason I never got involved with any groups like that, just like that, you've heard so many different stories about just what goes on inside them things. A lot of times the law itself is called, and speaking specifically from a justice major who knew the statistics, reason I stayed away from them was like, well, sexual assault, that's a major problem on college campuses. 80% occur in them fraternities. That's why I'm like, I ain't going anywhere near anything like that.
I have heard a lot of stories about things happening. In some of them, fraternities and sororities, they can get a little wild. Some are known for their parties, and I also didn't want to be a part of that. It wasn't for me. I mean, it still isn't for me, but even back then in my 20s, it just wasn't something that I wanted to take part in. So I understand where you're coming from. There are some fraternities or sororities that aren't like that, and they do some good things in the community. And I don't know if they're less popular or not, because like I said, I really don't know much about that world, but there are some that do some good on campus or in the community. They may raise funds or other things. I know there are some Christian organizations and they do good things. So there are some good ones. Let's think about on campus. So on campus, you have these dormitories, you have, of course, the buildings where students actually take their classes, and some other buildings. I remember at my university, we had a really large gym, and that was the place to be if you weren't taking classes or if you weren't working, which is something that a lot of students here do. I know that in many countries of my listeners, you may not actually work while going to the university or school, but that is quite common in the US. Many people may have a part-time job. Some people have to have a full-time job while they're studying. I remember at my university, there was this huge gym, and I loved going there when I didn't have classes, when I didn't have to work on campus, and they had all of the equipment inside. They had a basketball court, 2 basketball courts. They had a squash room. They had different exercise rooms for different classes. You could participate in Pilates, yoga, boxing. Oh my gosh, did they have Zumba? Zumba may have been after I graduated. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. And I would go there and participate in classes with my friends, and they had a ping pong table. It was incredible. I loved the gym. It was the place to be, unless I guess you were a party person and then you would find some party or something like that to go to. How was it at your university? Did you have some facility like that where a lot of students gathered and socialized?
We had the student center on campus, which, of course, I mean, that's also where all the food was. So that's where, we had a little Chick-fil-A Express. We had McDonald's. We had the Sbarros, like with the big slices of pizza, and they had other things too. But generally, that's where people would gather to like eat, hang out, socialize. And then they would have events from time to time, they would also have big sales that day, just whether it was different food or sometimes, one day they had a poster sale, and I found this really neat poster of Peyton Manning, who was one of my athlete heroes, I guess I'll say. But so yeah, it was kind of like that. It was fun from time to time.
All right, let's start to wind down. And I know you mentioned, so you studied criminology, right? So I was wondering, is your current job related to what you studied at the university? Because it's quite interesting. Many people may study something, like for instance, I studied international business, I studied communication, and yet the job I'm currently doing isn't related to either one. I mean, communication, everybody communicates, but it's not directly related to either of my majors at the university. So what about you? Is your current job related to your major?
Oh gosh, not even close. It's not even in the same field as what I went into. My current profession involves working around the OR, cleaning and re-sterilizing surgical instruments. So it's when I first out of college, I was trying different areas, but just some were just not paying enough money. Others, it was, you put in the time to do the interviews and just wasn't getting a final call back. But, of course, that's how life can go. Sometimes, you go a certain route. Sometimes you don't have no luck there. And then up until I got into what I've been doing for the past 6 years, I never even heard of it, knew what it is or anything. And it just kind of stuck. I enjoy it a lot, and it's very attention to detail. It's busy work. Shift flies by. Well, since it involves healthcare, we don't have to work directly with patients. That's probably the big reason I like it so much. But and I guess I'm happy with what I do.
I understand what you're talking about. I actually never thought that I would be teaching English as a second language. I thought I would be traveling around the world, getting business contracts signed, but that's not what happened. And I also thoroughly love my job. I love what I do so much. I'm so thankful for having this job that I really enjoy doing so much. Well, that does it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next one.